Welcome, thanks for joining me for your in-depth weekly astrology overview for week commencing the 27th of May. I'm going to share with you the standout details of this week and also the event chart, but please stay with me. I will explore each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces to give you a flavour of what you can expect in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. If you're new to my channel, it's great to have your company. This is very much a community. If you have any thoughts, please feel welcome to share them. If you're a returning visitor, or your views and interactions are truly appreciated. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, we have found that 45% of people who enjoy my videos are not subscribers. Please help the channel to grow and click that sub button, but also the bell notification symbol. Every time I drop a video, you will get an alert. Now, if you'd like to get your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning, please see the link below. Each day I also provide an overview of the key primary astrological influence, so we can all get the big picture as well as enjoy our ascendant, sun or moon forecast. I've been writing these for near to 30 years. Please take advantage of that. Also, I am a consultant astrologer. If you'd like to have a one-to-one with me, please check out my testimonials below. People share how they've experienced working with me. I don't edit these, and please enjoy reading those. Also, if you are a patron, thank you so much for all your support. If you'd like to be a patron, you can be so from $3 a month. Please see below for more. And if you'd like to ascend above a zodiac or star sign forecast and embrace the power of natal astrology, if you give me 3 pieces of your personal birth data of time, date and place, or date and place if you don't know your time, I can produce for you with my special package your life roadmap report, but also your 12 months transits, the moving planets in the sky interacting with your totally unique blueprint. These 2 reports can give you searing insights into your prospects. But if you know your tropical astrology really well, why not check out my draconic package? This is based on your soul or karmic energy that we bring into this world. It's the roots of our being. But working with this helps us to understand how the tropical analysis works too, because that is the outcome of those roots. And often the draconic chart can be very different to the natal chart. Please see below for more information on both. So on the screen now, I'm showing the event chart right at the start of the week. You can see there's a cluster of energy in the sign of Gemini. Gemini is a very bubbly, effervescent sign. It's very much to do with social interaction and quick thinking, but also fast communication. It can also be to do with short journeys. And that's particularly interesting because Jupiter, the planet that governs longer journeys, has visited the sign for the first time in 12 years. It arrived last Saturday, and you can see it's pretty close to Venus. Now, this is a very significant combination because in traditional astrology, these 2 planets are the planets of good luck, the greater and lesser benefit, but they're being blessed by the might of the tiny Pluto, also in an air sign, in its retrograde in Aquarius. This suggests that if we're expressing ourselves this week, but with conviction, so if we've got something important to us that we want to express, it's very likely that this will be taken more seriously. And it could be that this could have a profound impact on how we're seen by others. Some kind of paradigm shift in terms of how we all collectively communicate is also in the works. But there's also that energy in the sign of Pisces. And from Thursday, the moon moves into this area and forges a quarter moon with the sun. Now that does require some care. The energy of Gemini is very much about quick interactions. It's not so much about thinking carefully, but having 12th house energy with Saturn, also Neptune and the moon, suggests that there could be some distortion. And it's essential, therefore, that we do choose our words with a great deal of care. Now, by Friday, the moon moves forwards and applies to Saturn. Saturn has been bringing its more weighty and sometimes limiting presence to the sign of Pisces since last March. It's important, therefore, that when we're discussing anything, that we don't let something slip of a confidential nature, particularly if someone's asked us to keep a confidence, but also be aware that there may be someone who's very astute at picking up how we feel, even if it's not what we say, but then coming up with their own interpretation of our situation. And actually, they could be wrong. So it's very, very important that we understand that the subconscious is going to be clashing with our intellects in the latter part of this week. But also Mars, the planet of passion, drive and desire, is going to be applying to Chiron. And that happens on Wednesday. If there is something that we've been feeling a little bit affected by, perhaps even our morale has taken a little bit of a hit, perhaps we don't feel quite as strong in terms of our identity as we'd like, Mars gives Chiron quite a push. But it's important not to try to over assert ourselves, because that actually could be counterproductive. Now, one of the things we can do this week is work with our resources in an imaginative way. From Thursday through to Saturday, Mercury is going to be applying to Uranus in the sign of Taurus. It becomes exact on Friday. This could, unfortunately, create some physical headaches. The electricity of the sign of Uranus affects the nervous system of Mercury. Also, the host, Taurus, doesn't like to flex. And of course, Uranus has been a very provocative and unsettling influence in the sign of Taurus full time since 2019. What we can do in using this energy constructively is to try to think outside the box when it comes to our resources. Because of that communicational energy, which is so potent this week, if we are talking about ideas, it is important to be open to doing things in a fresh way. And that's what that energy of Mercury and Uranus enables to do if we give it the chance. So it's important this week to be aware of our resources, aware of the more psychological dimension of our situations, but most of all aware that this is a fabulous opportunity to connect to people, to like-minded people. If you're involved with publishing, the media, technology, websites, you have your own blog, you want to continue writing that book that we've all supposed to got within us, then this can be an extremely significant week. It may be a week also that some people will have some kind of connection with someone in a flirty way, and it could be great fun. But just be aware, with that quarter moon in Pisces and Saturn and Neptune all in that more shielded and hidden part of the overall energies of this week, that not everything may be as it seems, but on the whole, an incredibly significant week for us all to think about how we connect to one another, how we use technology, how we communicate, and most of all, how we represent our ideas with passion and no little sense of humour. Please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces. Welcome Aries to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 27th of May for the Ascendant, Sun or the Moon. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart right at the start of the week, and we have to be mindful of your ruler Mars as usual, and it continues in your sign, but it's just edged into the third decan. What makes this particularly impressive is this is sub-ruled by Jupiter, the planet of growth, optimism, and also travel. So if there is something that you want to instigate that requires more ambition and a bit more get-go, this combination will really help you this week. Now, as I mentioned in my prelude, also Mars is going to be applying to Chiron. If there is something that has proved to be a little bit wounding in recent months, particularly with Saturn going through your 12th house, maybe it was a situation that you couldn't completely control. Saturn in the 12th house is a very culminating energy, so it may go back many, many years when Saturn started to activate particular energies. So in your 12th house, that suggests that some things are coming to a close. But what makes this week so incredibly thrilling for you particularly, Aries, is the cluster of energy in the third house of Gemini is very quick moving, and it's also very dynamic because you had that solar eclipse in your sign, you've had Mars helping you, but you've also had Mercury going through that retrograde in your sign. So there was a sense of 1 foot forwards, 2 steps back, and that went on for 9.5 weeks. But what I feel that you're going to find now is that things really start to hurtle forwards at quite a pace. But you are still asked to stay mindful of all the lessons that you've been learning with Saturn's support over the last 13 months. Also, if you recall, Neptune has been in your 12th house since 2012. Now, it's coming to the end of its journey in the sign of Pisces. It's going to move into your sign briefly next year. But Neptune's cycle is 160 years. So you can see what an enormous time it's taken to get back to prepare to move into your sign. So in some ways, it's asking you to wake up your consciousness to some things that may not be particularly tangible. And all of this could feed into the discussions you have this week, because with the moon from the middle of the week squaring up with the sun, applying to also Saturn, perhaps something you would rather not think about may need to be thought through or talked through once more. This would be a very, very positive week if you were going to have some counselling, if you were going to talk to somebody who perhaps can give you an outside perspective, someone who does have quite a big and global view of your situation. And that actually can help you to bring some closure to some painful issues that have in some ways been inhibiting you. So I feel that Mars applying to Chiron can be a springboard from the middle of this week, but you just need to still stay very aware of the psychological, emotional and spiritual side of your situation. That said, if there are opportunities to meet up, mix and mingle and be more social, that can be really uplifting as well. But there can be some new contacts and new networks building up for you from this week, which prove to be really important for many months to come. It's been a real pleasure being with you, Aries. Have a great week, and if you've yet to do so, please do subscribe to this channel. Welcome, Taurus, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 27th of May for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart right at the start of the week. And I have to say it looks very promising in terms of your resources. Having your ruler Venus joined by Jupiter, but both of them angling back to Pluto in your sector of success, suggests that if you are applying for a position or you've been working very hard for some time, you can really realise the benefits this week. But also, you can just look at your situation, your qualities and your personal skills with a lot more personal respect. Because the sign of Gemini is very much about communication, but for you it's house 2. So through the discussions and thinking that you have, do recognise the gifts that you've got, because I feel that plaudits can come your way at this time. And if you have been struggling around resources, there can be an uptick. If you are someone who does enjoy a little bit of a flutter, it could just pay off for you at this time. Now, of course, there has been a lot of energy in the sign of Aries of late, not least that Mercury retrograde, which its entire journey through the sign of Aries, although the retrograde was 25 days, the whole journey was 9.5 weeks. And that saw you locked in to the more psychological part of your situation. Mars continues to at times see your mood be a little up and down, and it does apply to Chiron at the heart of this week. If there is some tenderness, particularly relating to a past issue that was upsetting, it could come up this week, but I refer to my earlier point about recognising your qualities. Also, from the middle of this week, as Mercury applies to Uranus in your sign, this is a nudge to dare to be different. If you are a Taurus who is or has a preference for sticking with what you know and perhaps being a tad more conventional, this particular combination at the end of the week suggests if you do think outside the box, it can pay off you, and financially as well. Now, as the week goes on, the moon does make its journey into the sign of Pisces, which is your sector of friendships. It's also your sector of networking, and the 11th house can be our future plans. Even if your finances show an uptick this week, I wouldn't be too quick to scatter your resources on things that aren't absolutely essential. But I would say that if you have a particular appreciation of good food and good wine, it may be very hard to resist some kind of get together and having a joyous celebration with the people who are really important to you, sharing those exact things. Have a great week, Taurus. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, please do so now. Welcome, Gemini, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 27th of May for the ascendant, the sun or the moon. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart right at the start of the week, and you can see a big cluster of energy, a stellium in your sign. What's really exciting is that Jupiter has just arrived, so it's right on that first house cusp. So that's going to give you a big boost of optimism, but also a sense of extra energy and self-belief. Because Venus, the other planet of fortune, is so close together with Jupiter, the opportunity to really demonstrate what makes you a one-off is definitely given a showcase. And one of the best ways you could do this, I think, could be thinking about your personal presentation. So whether it comes to the way you dress or your ideas that you're working on at the moment, don't hold back. You're going to be on particularly sparkling form. So it's really exciting as you come into this week. But of course, technically Jupiter is debilitated in your sign, but it's going to be with you for 12 months. So the best way to work with Jupiter is actually work hard. The great gift you've got, Gemini, is that Saturn, the planet of structure, is in the part of your situation to do with how you interact with the world at large. And it's also in an area that's very much to do with great responsibility. But it is true, as this week goes on, your desire at the present time, and it's a very strong desire with Pluto feeding into the energy of Jupiter and Venus, to be more dashing, adventurous, and more of a trendsetter, particularly with the expression of your ideas, that needs to be tempered about how those ideas will be received. Now, in the middle of this week, there's a great opportunity as Mars applies to Chiron. If you have been feeling a little bit unsure about how to reach a group of people, or perhaps a key aspiration, that gives you more self-belief. Just don't try too hard. But Mars does then move into your third decan, which is sub-ruled by Jupiter. But of course, Jupiter rules the sign of Sagittarius, which is a fire sign. So there's a mutual receptivity with it, with Mars moving into this part of its journey through its home sign. Essentially, it's going to give you that much more thrust and self-belief about those long-term plans. But then the moon moves into the sign of Pisces, and on Thursday we have a quarter moon. The quarter moon for you in the 10th house squares up with the sun in the first house. There could be a little bit, a conflict would be a strong word, but you may feel a bit torn. If you're really on a journey of individual self-expression, there could be something that comes up to do with a job or a position or a chance for you to showcase your talent to a wider audience, but the person offering or the organisation offering that opportunity may want it on their terms, or may want to convert your talent or your skill in a way which fits into their structure. If you're a natural bohemian, that can be a tense point, particularly when on Friday the moon moves to join up with Saturn, and you could feel a little bit frustrated. But keep the faith, because Mercury, your ruler, applies to Uranus towards the end of this week. And although Uranus has perhaps at times been quite the aggravant in terms of your nervous system in recent years, here there may be an opportunity for you to have an amazing light bulb moment. I think we all have them when we wake up in the middle of the night and think, Do you know, that is really, really brilliant. I'm going to work with that. It's completely different. It could be a mixture of your more psychological energies, your sensory energies, manifesting something that you can use in a more practical way. Could be to do with money, could be to do with a business idea. Now, once Mercury moves into your sign on the 3rd of June, and that's the day that Pluto and Jupiter reach an exact trine, that's going to be a very important day, and that's next week. So if you're building up towards something, doing your research, taking soundings, looking at situations in a different way to try to yield greater results, it's all part of a fluid process that you're evolving at the present time. But there's no doubt about it, having Venus and Jupiter in your sign together is so lovely, particularly with Jupiter in support for the first time across these two zodiac signs, with Pluto in Aquarius for over 220 years. Suggests if you are someone who really is lit up with expression, with individual ideas, with being very funny, and coming up with novel solutions to situations, you could find that other people are much more receptive than they have been, but you just need to be aware that they will have their own framework and own limitation. So if you want to really build some kind of relationship with them, it will be important to flex and be not too fixed in your approach. It's been a real pleasure being with you, Gemini. Have a great week, and if you've yet to subscribe, please do so now. Welcome, Cancer, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 27th of May for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart right at the start of the week, which provides some very important pointers, not least the position of your ruler, the Moon. It is in the sign of Capricorn, technically detrimented here, but for you, this arouses your skills as a relator. It also forges a very constructive link to the stern Saturn in your sector of knowledge, but also Mercury in the friendly 11th house. You could find yourself as an advice giver this week, Cancer, to be honest, but also if you did need to seek out professional support, whether it was a counsellor, an accountant, perhaps even a solicitor, this could be a week when people can come in and support you in a very private and confidential way, but very helpfully. But it is important to understand that Mars continues right at the top of your chart, which means that your pride and certainly your desire to receive recognition is turned up at this phase of the year, and it is going to be meeting Chiron by Wednesday. If you don't feel your professional situation is going quite as you would like, I wouldn't push too hard at the heart of this week, because by Thursday, the moon travels into your sister water sign of Pisces, but it squares up with the sun. You now have a collective in your 12th house, including the sun and also the part of fortune, the sign of Gemini. But a 9th, 12th house quarter moon can amplify our emotions, particularly our fears and anxieties, in a way which may be beyond how we'd ordinarily react. So in other words, you could find yourself being triggered in some way, which is a little bit unusual. But there are opportunities in your 12th house as well, because if you're someone who's particularly interested in the spiritual domain, Jupiter, the planet which governs the sign of Pisces and is the traditional ruler, it moving into your 12th house and also linking to Pluto right through this week. It becomes exact on the following Monday on the 3rd of June, but you're going to feel this energy. And if you're someone who really is into personal development, if you're into alternative medicine, if you're into healing, if you're into retreats, meditation, all of these areas can really come to life, not just this week, but over the next year. But because Venus, the lesser benefit, Jupiter being the greater benefit, is so close to Jupiter, there can be some enrichment that comes this week from discovering more about what makes you tick at a much deeper level. And the reason why this can be such a vivid week and such an important week is that Pluto, the planet of transformation, in your 8th house, that's very much about things coming to a close, but also being rebirthed. But that can happen with our psychology as much as in a physical sense. So there may be that something's shifting in terms of how you think about relationships. You could also find yourself thinking very, very deeply about someone from your past. It doesn't have to be an ex-partner or a lover. It could be an old school friend or colleague or family member. If you're really interested in genealogy, you could quarry out something at this time which proves to be absolutely gripping. But the key is, because the position of Jupiter and Venus are in the 12th house, that could mean that if a relationship isn't working for you, it could come to an end. And Pluto can see ends and beginnings. But if an end does occur, that gives you the opportunity to rebirth yourself as an individual. But you may need to go through a period of deep reconsideration, and that's what the 12th house is about. It can be about healing, but most of all, it can be about needing to withdraw a little bit. So there's a paradox, because Mars is asking you to be loud and large. As Mercury moves forwards by Friday, it links with Uranus, which can give you some brilliant future-orientated ideas. But as we tune into that energy in Gemini, perhaps there will be some times when you do actually want to seek some shelter, some quiet, and some time to cocoon yourself away. So although there can be opportunities to be that advice giver or receiver, essentially this is a time of very deep thinking, a pause in a way, a time to really rejuvenate the deeper part of your situation and understand what really is very important to you right at the core of your being. It's been a real pleasure being with you, Cancer. Have a great week. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, please do so now. Welcome, Leo, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 27th of May for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. On the screen now, I'm sharing your event chart right at the start of the week. And we can see that your ruler, the Sun, is at 6 degrees and 12 minutes. But Jupiter has just arrived in the sign, joining with Venus and also the path of fortune. The 11th house is where we network, but it's also where we plan our future moves. But it's also a part of astrology that's to do with our highest hopes. So it can be very idealistic. And having Jupiter arrive in this sector is really significant because it is the planet of optimism. But through its rulership of the sign of Pisces, it's also about faith. And in a way, the 11th house is asking us to really believe that there's something bigger than beyond just the tangible physical plane. So whatever your hopes are, you have an enormous opportunity to really push forwards towards them, particularly if you're a very creative type of person. And also, your friendships can be very enriching at this time. Now, I do feel that astrologers tend to get into a little bit of hot water when we talk about relationships, because relationships have myriad ways of operating, and it's not always about a romantic tie. And you can see that Pluto is right on your 7th house cusp. Now that's going to give you more confidence to set your boundaries in terms of your interactions, but its link to both Jupiter and Venus through this week suggests that there could be some new alliances developing, not necessarily romantically, but in terms of your connections. Now, one of these could have an attractor factor to it. So there may be someone that you're very drawn to for sure, but it doesn't have to be around an intimate connection. Now you can also see that Mars, the planet which subrules the 3rd decan of your sign, has just moved into the 3rd decan of the sign of Aries, which is subruled by Jupiter. The combination of all of this is that your self-assurance about opening things up, being more experimental, is going to be really strong. But if you feel that you lack some knowledge or some skills or perhaps a particular qualification, don't focus on that too much, particularly at the heart of this week as Mars applies to Chiron. Don't underestimate how your life experience and your instinctive energies can be so valuable when you interact with people. But as this week goes on, from Thursday, there is a quarter moon. Now, the moon is in the sign of Pisces. Pisces energy for you is your shared resources. It's also where you're most emotionally invested. If there is somebody around a group alliance who tends to be a little bit jealous or envious of you, I just would be a little guarded, particularly as by Friday the moon moves forwards and applies to the stern Saturn. You could feel that something could really cool off if you sense that someone is almost having to control your every move. This is a time when you need to collaborate with people, and it needs to be based on consent, not because we don't want to let someone down or feel we need to do the right thing. Because having the path of fortune, the sun, Venus and Jupiter in your 11th house, the most idealistic part of your way of relating needs to come through. But there is a glorious link between Mercury and Uranus towards the end of this week, Leo, and this gives you a chance to be more experimental. You've been pushed and prodded by Uranus full time since March 2019 to explore different ways of approaching life and thinking about your worldly interactions and potentially around your work, but perhaps also about your responsibilities. You know, if you have grandchildren, that may be the thing that really sees you come to life, or it may be a personal hobby. Whatever really gives you a lot of buzz in terms of how you connect with people, there's an opportunity to look at something afresh. But the electric energy of Uranus can affect the nervous energy of Mercury. So around your professional situation, if there is a lot of stress and you're having to find new ways of flexing and dealing with some of the pressures affecting your business, the big piece of advice I'd give you this week is really work on the personal side of your interactions. So even if there is some frustration or there's some sudden demands, obviously things happen quickly with Uranus and Mercury, your ability to think outside the box but keep those lines of communication open in as positive a way as possible is really going to be the key to this week's success. It's been a real pleasure being with you. Have a great week, and if you've yet to subscribe to my channel, please do so now. Welcome Virgo, it's your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 27th of May for the ascendant, the sun or the moon. On the screen now I'm showing the event chart right at the start of the week, which gives us some very important information. Now, you've got a reputation of being someone who's very reliable. When someone asks you to do something, if you agree to do it, you tend to do it in a very efficient, practical and precise way. In fact, you're often the person that knits together many a bigger picture because you do go through the processes in such a responsible manner. But the stars at this time, Virgo, are asking you to push yourself into the limelight. And if you are someone who's got special talents, and perhaps you've been pushing yourself slowly but surely with Uranus's help full time since March 2019 to be more experimental and perhaps access a more free-spirited part of your nature, it's not to say that you've stopped being conscientious, but that direction of travel that you've been on can now all crest into the planets as they are at the present time. So in house 10, that's very much about your connection to the wider world. Now, for many people, this can be through their work, but it can also be to do with community activities. It could also be to do with parenting role, and if you're older, even with grandchildren. It could be about personal interests, but wherever you glow up, the chances are you're going to receive a lot more recognition. But there's been another agent provocateur in your situation, but it's been much more recent. It's been Pluto. Of course, for 11 weeks in 2023, from the 27th of March to the 11th of June, it was just in your 6th house, but it's been back since the 21st of January. And through to the 1st of September, it again is pushing you to think about those roles that you often take on in a very uncomplaining way, where you provide that precision, that sense of care. But what this cluster of energy in Gemini is asking you to do is to take much more seriously your leadership qualities, your individual talents, your flair, and really be open to raising your profile. And with Jupiter, the planet of growth, right on your solar 10th house cusp, this can give you more self-assurance. But Pluto, which is suggesting that maybe you should review the structures which have served you so well for many a year, that's in retrograde, but angling to both Jupiter and also Venus. So your people skills, but also your personality power, can be very important blended with your talent and your skills and experience, and there could be a new role in the mix for you. But the key here, Virgo, is you have to push yourself into the limelight. Now, if you're someone who's a little bit reticent or shy, that may be more challenging. But as this week begins, you do get some added support because your ruler Mercury is in your 9th house of exploration and adventure, but also knowledge. It's forging a very stable link to Saturn in your sector of relating. If you do have a conversation with someone influential at the start of this week, I think you can come across as someone who really can be relied upon. Even if you're wanting to take on more responsibility, go for a bigger job, or even start your own creative business. Also, Mars, the planet of passion, continues its journey in the sign of Aries, but in house 8 for you, which really evokes more of its scorpionic energy, so much more about desire. But that's going to be linking with Chiron in the middle of this week. If there's part of you that feels that invest in yourself or invest in your money would be something that you're rather guarded about, Mars here is actually going to overcome some of your reservations. But also, as the week began, the moon was in your sister Earth sign of Capricorn. Technically not at its best, but for you, this is where you can also show your warmth of personality. So there's lots of opportunities as this week goes on, but by Thursday, the moon has travelled into your opposite sign. And as much as you can showcase your talents very carefully and very well, you still need to actually have that dialogue. And it would be possible that maybe someone you need to interact with as a link person isn't quite getting the potential that you're exploring. That frustration can become even greater on Friday when the moon aligns to Saturn. But keep the faith, because by the end of this week, your ruler moves forwards, merges with Uranus, and suddenly you can make that connection, and there could be an electric connection with someone who's really impressed at your confidence to try something different. So as much as you're very much the person who helps those processes work in such an efficient and productive way, this is a time for you to actually push yourself forwards and really have that much more confidence in your sense of worth, and through your personality power, your creative skills, you're going to be much more in the spotlight. So do enjoy the acclaim. It's been a pleasure being with you, Virgo. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a great week. If you've yet to subscribe, please do so now. Welcome, Libra, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 27th of May for the Ascendant, the Sun, or the Moon. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart for your sign right at the start of the week. This provides some very important pointers. Not least, we need to be mindful of your ruler Venus. Now, Venus starts this week pretty well equidistant between Jupiter, the planet of growth, optimism and good fortune, and the Sun, all in the sign of Gemini, which shares your air triplicity. Here you're in the mood to open up, to be more explorative, perhaps even more adventurous. If you have been thinking of booking a holiday or vacation, the chances are you can be drawn to somewhere that really can set your senses free. If you're someone who's particularly interested in culture, history, philosophy, all of these areas can really draw you at this time. But the ninth house is where we want to break free and have a little bit more liberation. But you've had Saturn, the planet of restraint, in a very responsible part of your situation over the last year. And actually, Saturn forges an excellent link to Mercury, the planet of communication, right at the start of this week. If you do need to probe something and find some information, particularly information that's going to give you a lot of new perspectives, the chances are not only can you be open to this with all that Gemini energy, you can also go about the process in a very thorough and systematic way. We also need to be mindful of the 7th house, which is very reflective of the energy of your sign. Now here we have the North Node, but also the thrust of Mars. And on Wednesday, Mars moves forwards and connects with Chiron. If you have been feeling that your relationship situation just isn't working as well as you would like, the thing with Venus in your 9th house is it will be a truth seeker, but Mars applying to Chiron in the 7th reminds you of the importance of valuing your identity. The 7th house can see us a bit too caught up in people pleasing, which can of course be a Libra tendency. But Mars being on Chiron like that just asks you to make sure that you set your boundaries. It is important to get that midpoint between what we want as an individual and what we're prepared to give and collaborate around. And because of the 9th house energy, if there is a relationship which hasn't been working quite as well, you may be in the mood to break free. It might not necessarily be a permanent arrangement, but the desire to have a bit more freedom and independence can certainly be very attractive to you. Now, if you're single, the converse can be true. You could find yourself drawn to someone who comes from a completely different background to you, someone who has a lot of world or life experience. But if they are someone who's very interested in things like the arts, or perhaps travel, or different countries, then that is going to be someone that is going to pique your interest. Now, as the week goes on, the moon moves forwards from a little bit of a protective start to the week in Capricorn, moves through your sister air sign of Aquarius, initially passing over Pluto, but then by Thursday is in a square with the Sun. So the 6th house energy is competing with the 9th. Remember, the 9th house energy of Gemini wants you to be a free spirit, but Saturn in the 6th house wants to remind you of all your obligations and responsibilities. If ever there was a planetary guilt trip, Saturn is providing it at this moment, particularly when on Friday the moon moves forwards and comes into a conjunction with Saturn. So you could find yourself a bit compromised, that need to break out, be a bit more fluid, perhaps even a bit more spontaneous, may be countered in some way by something you feel you can't get out of, or someone may remind you of a prior commitment, which could prove to be a little bit frustrating. But you know, there's a tremendous link between Mercury, the planet of communication, and Uranus as this week draws to a close. Uranus has been pushing and prodding around where you're most invested over the last 5 years. That may have seen some challenges around long-term finances or property, shared resources. Perhaps there's been at times very sudden and unpredictable events which have been hard to deal with. What Mercury does here is gives you an opportunity to delve deep, to get beneath the surface. You may spot an opportunity by scrutinizing something in a fresh way that someone else could miss. And if you are a natural entrepreneur or you work in a business role in your job, this is a great opportunity to shine. But I would say with Venus applying to Pluto through this week, and also Jupiter to Pluto for the first time in over 200 years. Pluto in your 5th house is very much about where you showcase what you want as an individual. It's where you want to be passionate. And if there's something that's really exciting you, or someone that's really exciting you, or a new project or an interest, don't hold back. Saturn's kind of reminding you of what you should really be doing, but I feel that collection of energy in Gemini and the position of Pluto are provoking you to get in touch with a side of yourself which is much freer, much more experimental, but could prove to be very, very exciting, particularly the connections you can make. And if you can make connections through travel, through publishing, through technology, the chances are they can be very meaningful indeed. Have a great week, Libra. If you've yet to subscribe, please do so now. Welcome, Scorpio, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 27th of May for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart right at the start of the week. And this provides some very important clues of how things can unfold. Now, Pluto, your modern ruler, continues to loiter right on your fourth house cusp. The fourth house cusp is very much about where we withdraw to rest. It's the nighttime part of our overall chart. Here, collectively for Scorpios, this is pushing you, provoking you through to the first day of September this year to really explore deeply your emotional responses. It could be your connection to your family, maybe your historical roots, maybe even in terms of your ancestors. Those are things that you may have been digging down and getting much more information about, because remember, Pluto can be very probing. But it's also the planet of transformation. And your sign is a sign that really appreciates that life does shift. Even if there are parts of your existence which do provide a degree of continuity because you're a fixed sign, because Mars is about desire, your traditional ruler, and Pluto is about change, essentially change is something you quite shrewdly know is ultimately going to come. Because the 8th house, which is very redolent of the energy of your sign, is aglow with energy this week. You can see that Jupiter, the planet of growth, optimism and self-assurance, Venus, the Sun and the part of fortune are all gathered in this 8th house. Now, in the case of Jupiter and Venus, they're angling back to Pluto on that 4th house cusp. But for you, the 8th house is where you're most devoted. So it's where you're most in. Jupiter can be about trade. Venus can be about money. We can think about the 8th house archetype as being very much to do with entrepreneurship. If you're trying to strengthen the basis of your security in your life through your earnings, this could be a very important time. Some big alterations can happen that can be very positive, particularly if you're linking very closely with others, or if you're very shrewd at investment. If you like to have a little bit of a flutter, your ability to see beneath the surface is really emphasized. That's a great part of what makes you so talented. But your other ruler, Mars, is giving you a lot of physical vitality. Now, if you are feeling a little bit lower in energy than you would like, I can assure you that Mars gives you an opportunity to give you some uplift right at the heart of this week, as it applies to Chiron, the wounded healer. If you do feel that you give a lot to others, but you don't necessarily feel that you get much back, one of the things you can do at this very evolutionary time of the year for you is to actually accept that you aren't always going to get it back. But the giving that you're doing actually is your free will. And at the start of this week also, Saturn in your 5th house, which has been there for about 13 months. Now, Saturn in the 5th house does not have a great reputation, but in this transiting situation, it's just asking you to work at your creative talents that much harder. But it's forging a brilliant link to Mercury in the part of your scope to do with your connections to others. And it suggests that if you have got something flowing for you that you're really inspired by, your ability to link out and express your ideas is actually really given a big lift. So if, as Mars applies to Chiron, you're not necessarily getting exactly what you want back, just understand that this is a time when your bigger plan, the big changes in your life, is really the primary important thing. And although it could be disappointing if someone's not tuning into you, by the end of this week, you may get a surprise text message or email which suggests they are on to what you have to offer. Also, I would say as this week begins, the moon's in your third house in the very practical sign of Capricorn, but that's linking brilliantly to Saturn and Mercury too. So do understand that your communications this week can be quite crisp, but I feel there's a deeper psychological shift going on. It can affect your resources very dynamically and very positively, so there could be an improvement in your income, but also in a romantic context, the 8th house is where we want to be very devoted. And if there is someone that you're feeling that sweet connection with and it's really mutual and it's working well and you're prepared even to open up around your very private inner emotional world, it could be a relationship that could become very, very important, but also it could be very sensual as well. So there are a number of different options there, but of course the 8th house, where that gathering of Gemini energy is, can also be around what can end. And if something hasn't worked out for you and you do want to shift on, there could be some legacy, some kind of division of assets that could come to you. And if it does, it could actually be surprisingly much better than you expect. I hope you have a great week, Scorpio. Thank you so much for joining me. If you've yet to subscribe, please do so now. Welcome, Sagittarius, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 27th of May for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart right at the start of the week, which gives us some very important pointers. Not least, we always have to be mindful of the ruler of each sign. In your case, Jupiter is right on your 7th house cusp. So on Saturday last week, Jupiter returned to Gemini for the first time in 12 years. This does give you a potential to grow your interactions with others over the next 12 months. It's possible with Venus so close to Jupiter, as you can see, that this particular week could see a significant development around some kind of alliance. Now, this could be in a personal context, but just as easily it could be in a professional one. The 7th house is where we can present ourselves, and that combination, the two planets of fortune, right from the off this week, certainly gives you a lot of uplift. But there's more, because for you, Sagittarius, very often there's some kind of knowledge or excitement or expansion involved in your situation. And because Pluto, the planet of truth and transformation, is right on your 3rd house cusp, very much about the quick exchange of ideas, the way you can arc into people is going to be very persuasive, very passionate, but also potentially very meaningful. So don't underestimate the value of the interactions you can have as this week begins. It could be very intense, but very interesting too. Now, the moon does start this week in your 2nd house. It is detrimented in Capricorn, but this can see you just thinking about your personal finances. It also links to Saturn in the 4th house. So if it's domestic finances you're thinking about, that could be part of the conversation that's being led by Jupiter and Venus. Perhaps you're going to talk to an advisor, get some input on how you can shape things in a different way. But one of the things you can do at the start of this week, Sagittarius, is grapple with some details. Something that sometimes can be a little bit dull for you, because Saturn links along with the moon back to Mercury in the most precise part of your situation. If you do need to sift through information, put a budget together, perhaps declutter where you live, sell off things you no longer need, perhaps sort out some cupboards to make your abode that much more ordered. All of these things can be something that gives you a lot of uplift as this week begins. But as it goes on, the gliding moon makes its way by Thursday into your 4th house, where Saturn and Neptune are. Now, over the last year, Saturn has certainly been asking some questions about where you live, how you live there, and also your family relationships, but also your relationship with your own emotions. And on Thursday, there is a quarter moon with the sun in your seventh house. Maybe is you can find yourself caught between two different people who see things in a very different way. You may be close to both of those people and find yourself as an almost cosmic ref, which you may not appreciate. But it's also possible that if you're trying to express how you feel around an emotional issue, however much another person may superficially seem to be tuning in, you may not feel they're quite getting your message. And that energy can amp up by Friday. But what can also happen towards the end of this week is that because Mars, the planet of passion, connects with Chiron midweek, that's giving you a lot of thrust to express your ideas and also showcase your talent. And then when Mercury moves forwards to connect with Uranus as the week draws to a close, if you have got brilliant ideas but you want to go about working with them in a different and fresh way, very Sagittarian, you have a wonderful platform to really work from. And therefore, if there is something that's a little different in your situation that requires a fresh or innovative approach, it can work well for you. The one thing I would say, however, is you could be feeling a little bit of nervous tension as this week draws to a close, because Mercury governs the nervous system. Uranus is an electric energy, and the host, the sixth house, Taurus, can resist change, so it's not very flexing. And if there is something you do need to just adapt to quickly, it could cause a little bit of a sense of overwhelm. So just be prepared for that. But certainly your relationship sector is set up beautifully this week. It's possible with Jupiter in your seventh house that the next 12 months could bring some significant changes in terms of people that you're close to. And that in itself is very exciting. But as ever with Jupiter, we can't take it for granted. We have to put the work and the application in too. It's been a real pleasure being with you. Have a great week. If you've yet to subscribe, please do so now. Welcome Capricorn to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 27th of May for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart at the start of the week for your sign, which gives us some very important pointers. Not least, the Moon is in Capricorn as the week begins. The Moon here can give us a closer connection to our instincts, but the Moon links to Saturn, your ruler, in the third house. Saturn has at times been making you a little bit more cautious about expressing yourself over the last year, but also helped you to perhaps rethink some of your key belief systems and ideas. But the Moon and Saturn linking in this constructive way suggests if you've got something to say, the chances are people are going to feel that you're being very much in touch with how you feel and therefore authentic and real. But both are linking to Mercury. Mercury in your fifth house is about where you can add sunshine to the equation, particularly in terms of your thinking, Mercury, and how you express your ideas and passion. So that combination is very positive as this week begins. And talking about positivity, the planet of positivity, Jupiter, moved late last week for the first time in 12 years back into your sixth house. This is giving you a big challenge because the perception of Jupiter is that Jupiter enriches us, but Jupiter doesn't enrich us without a lot of effort on our parts. But over the next year, if you wanted to change your job, perhaps move into something that was more creative and gave you more personal investment, then the chances are, if you really apply yourself, something fabulous can unfold. Now immediately, Pluto, the planet of transformation in your second house of everyday money, links to Jupiter. So there could be an opportunity almost straight away, particularly as the other planet of fortune, Venus, is so close to the position of Jupiter. But Jupiter's also laying down the gauntlet to you, particularly when it comes to your organisation at home. If you're someone who's very, very up to date and together in this area, it may not show itself quite so much. But if you're a bit more laid back, this is the time to try to get things working that much more slickly. But also, Jupiter and Venus together could be a pointer towards a pet, particularly if it's something that you get a lot of enjoyment from. If you already have a furry friend, that love affair is going to get even more important to you. But seriously, having Jupiter and Venus together in the 6th house does suggest you do need, in whatever you're doing, more enrichment from creativity. And that's something to really look out for. Now, the 6th house can also be about health, physical health. Over the next year, you have a chance to work on that area. But of course, Jupiter and Venus together can be a chance to enjoy the good things in life. And you may find that your willpower right at the start of this week is not at its highest. But as the week goes on, by Wednesday, Mars in your 4th house, which has been prompting you to get some physical changes sorted out at home, perhaps for some Capricorns even moving altogether, but that applies to Chiron. If you have felt in your life that you've been very much a listener and a support to others, but they've not been there for you so much, your anger, to be honest, your frustration about that inequality could peak at the heart of this week. But there's also another issue here. If there is a sense that family members are rather preoccupied with their own needs, if you get too caught up with this, the chances are they won't give you what you need. So it's an opportunity to work on some healing, really, in terms of your relationship with your own vulnerabilities. But by Thursday, the moon moves on and moves into Pisces and squares up with the sun in Gemini, 2 mutable signs. So for you, this is 3rd, 6th house energy. The moon then moves forwards on Friday and connects to your ruler. If you are feeling in your professional situation that there is quite a lot of demands, expectations, and people are only too happy to put more on your plate, then that could be something that you can find yourself being a bit stressed out by. So towards the end of this week, I think it's really important to prioritise. Just do the things that are absolutely essential. And if you need to push back, speak up and set your boundaries, do so. Because Jupiter and Venus being in your 6th house could almost make you too much of a people pleaser. So just be conscious of that. But also, as this week draws to a close, Mercury inches forwards and connects to Uranus. You have a reputation of being a very solid citizen, someone who works on things in a very systematic way to get the value from them. But you can show your flair, your imagination and innovation in a brilliant way as this week draws to a close. And I feel there could be a link with that job. If you are trying to change something around your employment situation, a fresh idea may be the avenue to a better outcome for you. It's been a real pleasure being with you, Capricorn. Have a great week, and if you've yet to do so, please subscribe to the channel. Welcome, Aquarius, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 27th of May for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart right at the start of the week, which does provide some very important pointers. Not least, the cluster of energy in your sister air sign of Gemini. This is gorgeous. We can look at the overall zodiac and we know that Gemini is the 3rd zodiac sign. We know it's an air sign. We know it's ruled by Mercury and therefore it's very bubbly, fast moving and interactive. But for you, in terms of your solar overlay, Gemini represents house 5, which is very much where we showcase our passions. It's where we achieve joy. It's the sunshine part of your chart. It is very Leonian. So this is an awesome opportunity for you to really connect to people with maximum self-confidence. But at the start of the week, the paradox is that the moon is tucked up in your 12th house, which is much more muted, can be very reflective, and can actually see us wanting to step back from interaction with people. So there are some mixed signals as this week begins, but if you're creative or you have ideas that you want to share with important people, the fact that Pluto in your sign connects with Jupiter and Venus, and Jupiter and Venus are so closely together at the start of this week, suggests that fortune can favour the brave. So even if you are feeling a little quieter in yourself, don't hold back from seizing the moment to raise your vibration and reach out to people that would be important to you. Now that could be in a social context, it could be romantically, but it could be professionally too. But you know, even though the moon is a bit quiet at the start of this week, it does forge a very constructive angle to your traditional ruler of Saturn. If you are thinking, concurrent to that sparkling energy in Gemini, about your home and emotional but even financial situation, some very solid moves can be made as this week begins for you. Also by Wednesday, Mars, which is in your third house, pushing you to speak up, have the confidence to express your ideas, links to Chiron. If you have had the thought that sometimes your ideas do not get met with much enthusiasm, try to overcome this at the heart of this week. It could be the perfect time to strike out, but also be aware that not everyone will necessarily respond exactly as you want, and try not to get too frustrated if that's the case. Now, as the week moves on, the moon connects with Pluto in your sign, so your desire to get in touch with what really defines you as an individual will strengthen. But then by Thursday, the moon has moved into Pisces and it squares up with the sun. Now, the other thing about the fifth house in Gemini for you personally is this represents your sector of speculation. So if you are someone who's interested in dabbling, perhaps in stocks and shares, Bitcoin, perhaps you've got an imaginative idea that's very important to you and you're prepared to have a little bit of a punt on it, just be aware with this quarter moon that it's important to get your information really clear. In fact, you get an opportunity to do that on Friday because the moon applies to Saturn. But that could make you feel a little bit deflated if you're not getting immediate feedback to some of the sparkling ideas that you've emanated. But stick with it, because your ruler Uranus, your modern ruler of Uranus, receives Mercury as this week draws to a close. Could see you feeling perhaps a little bit strung out, maybe a bit tense. Maybe you could even have a headache. But what it will be doing is helping you to think in so many different ways about how you can marshal your situation. There could even be some changes at home. If you've ever thought of working from home, but it's not something that you've actually been able to make happen so far, some kind of step forwards could occur as this week draws to a close. But most of all, Aquarius, it's important to understand that that collective in the sign of Gemini is your chance to showcase what makes you really different. It's not a time to follow how you think other people want to see you. So if you've got original, innovative ideas, the extra confidence that Jupiter and Venus can give you, or if there is somebody that you're strongly attracted to, this can be that time to just push outside your comfort zone. I can't guarantee you will get exactly the result you want, but the planets are giving you that platform. With astrology, it's all about timing. Now, Jupiter is actually going to give you a big boost for the next year. And that's the secret with Jupiter, not to just wait for Jupiter to provide to us. We need to be proactive. And that fifth house energy is really encouraging you to seize the moment in every possible way you can, to glow up and demonstrate to people just how absolutely gorgeous and charismatic you are. It's been a real pleasure being with you, Aquarius. Have a great week. If you've yet to subscribe, please do so now. Welcome, Pisces, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 27th of May for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. On the screen now, I'm sharing the event chart at the start of the week, which does provide some very important pointers for you. Not least, your two rulers, traditional of Jupiter and your aquatic ruler of Neptune, are in a very positive alliance. But of course, Jupiter moved at the end of last week into a new home for the first time in 12 years into the sign of Gemini, which is about quick communication. But the combination of your two rulers is saying that your instincts and intuition with Neptune can guide the actions, the positive actions that Jupiter makes, but particularly around home, emotional and family issues. If you are wanting to relocate, the next year can be a time when you can achieve this. But also this can be a time when you're feeling very sentimental and reminiscing about people from your past. You may even try to put together some kind of reunion. It might not be about your family. It could be about people you used to work with, go to college with, or long-standing friendships. And the reason for this, Pisces, is having Jupiter, the planet of faith, in terms of your influence over the planet, in your fourth house, very close to Venus, is it can give you that sense of wanting to get in touch with those good old days. It's rather like the Six of Cups in the Tarot, a real sense of nostalgia. But of course Jupiter can also be about growth and change and positivity. And if where you've been living hasn't quite been working for you, this can be a good time to adapt your accommodation. Perhaps redecorate, maybe even start a home-based business or a service based in your locality. But most of all, you need to be in touch with how things feel. And because you're a water sign, that sounds pretty logical, yes? Well, it's just that Saturn over the last year in your sign has perhaps at times been quelling that part of your nature. It's been pushing you to be more pragmatic, to simplify your life, to get your life working in a much more slimmed down way. It may have also affected your sense of confidence and physical vitality. So one of the things this new beginning of all these planets in Gemini can do, and the way they link to Pluto, which is asking you to get in touch with your deepest instincts, is to try to recreate a world in terms of your everyday immediate environment, which is much more pleasing to your senses. Now that could come, of course, from being in your garden space. It could be from adapting your home or from that home decoration, but also it can come through people for sure. And if you have in some ways been a little bit cut off from people and separating yourself from situations, this is an opportunity to open up and develop your emotional sphere. Because although you have a reputation of being hugely compassionate to those who are less fortunate, which I think is well founded, sometimes there's another part of your nature that's all give and then completely secludes yourself away and is not so good at receiving. So that's one of the themes that I feel is going to be developing over the next 12 months, an encouragement to get in touch with reception around emotion. But also, as this week goes on, the moon moves to connect with Saturn in your sign. That happens by Friday. But we do have midweek a connection between Mars and Chiron. Now for you, they're in house 2. If there is a part of you that doesn't feel as valuable as it could, Mars gives you a bit more pash to stand up for what's rightly yours, and it could be around finances. But then on Thursday, we do have a quarter moon. So the moon in Pisces squaring up with the sun in Gemini. This is really asking you to stand up for what's important for you as an individual, because some of that fourth house energy that's developing in Gemini could mean that other people's needs are going to come in and seek your attention. And perhaps at this particular juncture, whilst it's important to, I feel, develop your feeling dimension, it's also important to maintain the boundaries that Saturn's been teaching you over the last year. And that becomes even clearer on Friday as the moon connects to Saturn. But also as the week draws to a close, the chance to have an extremely upbeat, bright and effervescent conversation with someone is presented by Mercury connecting to Uranus. But don't be surprised if you also feel a little bit revved up, find it hard to sit still, a little wired. If you can get out for a walk, can do something a little bit more physical to burn off some energy, that would be a good thing to do. But if you do work in technology, and many of us are connected to technology in one way or another, certainly as the week draws to a close, try to get into as a tranquil environment as possible. If you are someone who enjoys swimming or being in nature, an awesome opportunity as this week draws to a close to really enjoy those activities. It's been a real pleasure being with you, Pisces. Have a great week, and if you've yet to subscribe to my channel, please do so now.